Welcome to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. With me today is Liz. How are you today, Liz?
I'm well, thank you, Paul.
Great stuff. And what have you been up to?
Well, I actually feel really refreshed because I recently came back from holiday from 2 weeks away, and it's a real treat going away for 2 weeks because you can just really try to switch off in the day. And then
Yeah,
because of the time zone, I was logging in first thing and last thing, but I felt really relaxed when I came back.
yeah.
And yes, I've come back and it's obviously been busier, but I've tried not to rush into things. So that was strategically planned. So yeah, I'm feeling really good and refreshed.
Yeah, and where have you been?
I went to Bali.
That's
I
Bali.
went to Bali
Lovely.
for 2 weeks, yeah,
I,
so it was
I think I
incredible.
think I'd come back refreshed from 2 weeks in Bali too. So great stuff. I mean, looking at the podcast then, what we're looking at today is obviously your big idea that you're going to share in a moment. But before we do that, what I'd like you to do is firstly introduce yourself, and then what I was going to do is talk a little bit about the future, if that's okay. So, do you want to introduce yourself? Just tell everybody what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of 1080 and co-founded 1080 about 14 years ago with Michael Moran and only stepped up in the last year. So this has been a slightly different year, an exciting year for me. But before that, and historically, I did a history of art degree, worked at the National Gallery, and then decided I'm quite a curious individual and I'm really driven by the way people think. So that's when I made the move into HR consultancy, worked for an HR consultancy for 7 years, and then thought, actually, I want to do this on my own. And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. So obviously with the landscape now, because there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? There's a lot of change. A lot of organizations are integrating AI. So how do you see the future, maybe the future of work at this moment in time?
So much changing. It's crazy how quickly AI is changing things. And we see in our clients those who are ready with every move and those who are really quite apprehensive about it and that trust, that ethics in with AI in particular. But it's really starting to save time. In the legal profession, it's amazing hitting all the job cuts there because AI can do certain things.
Yeah,
Generational difference is huge. The five generations, what
yeah,
the younger generation wants is very different, and we'll tie in that later with the interest in well-being, but also to the older generation. But also that reverse mentoring I've seen a bit more of, with those with more experience trying to help the younger generation with the world of work, and with that sense of, the younger generation can help with the IT skills generally, but actually the older generation can really help with that empowering, the enabling, the upskilling, the patience, and so
yeah.
many other things.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, there's so much that seems to be changing around us at this moment in time, but at the same time, change has been a norm for a while now. So you go, it's just really the onset of AI more than anything, and how that's impacting the world of work. So talking about the big idea then that you bring into the table, what's the big idea that we're talking about today?
Well, I wanted to talk about well-being, which is an area of passion of mine.
Yeah,
And I think with 1080, because we as a business have always been focusing on leadership, management development,
yeah,
executive coaching, outplacement, and well-being has been intertwined within all our services. But actually, we now want to make it a pillar in itself. Just because it's such an important area to focus on, employees are really wanting it, and I think it has been done in the past to a degree, but it's very, very different nowadays. What an employee wants nowadays is much more personal rather than the one size fits all approach.
right, okay. So how did for you to go, because obviously being focused on leadership and all of that good stuff, to now go, we're going to make this a pillar. How did you come upon that decision? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so we did a piece of research about 3 years ago. So we'd come out of COVID and we really wanted to understand what our clients will be buying in,
Yeah,
say, at that point of doing it in that 2 to 5 years' time.
yeah,
And obviously AI came out, future skills, but as well as that, strongly was well-being and a lot around that mental health, a lot around caring, a lot around physical, emotional, all of that well-being. So we thought, well, let's really look into it and see how we can be different, but how we can support what people need, but be proactive rather than reactive with it.
okay. And I guess the question that I'm going to ask is, why do you think well-being came out as a top area for organizations that plan to invest in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I think organizations are starting to really join the dots between how people feel and how
Yeah.
they perform. And
Yeah.
over the last few years, we've seen a real shift, with burnout, disengagement, and absence that are no longer isolated issues. They're much more systemic.
Yeah.
At the same time, expectations have changed, and employees, I think, are far more aware of their well-being and much more willing to leave an organisation if it's not provided, if the support isn't there. And we all know if you want to attract and retain people, well-being has to be at the core of the offering.
Do you know what? It's amazing as well because I go back to the time when I was working in a company, and they had an on-site gym, they had football courts at the back, and I look back and think that was one of the main reasons that I stayed in the company because it actually became a social aspect as well. And it's
Mm.
something that, when a company gets that right, that part of, because actually indirectly there's a gym, there was more to it than that. You could do classes, but the whole concept of it being linked to the workplace, it meant it was a better place to work, basically, than the places I'd worked before. So, I can obviously see the massive value in it.
And
Um,
that's our strap line, making the world of work a better place. But it's true, it's that collaboration. People collaborate better when
yeah,
they're around people who can think differently. And when you're in that mood, that great mood is probably, when you've got that when you've got that energy. But I also think trust plays a big part of it.
yeah,
Uh, because you need to know who you can talk to if you do need to. And so what we're seeing a big shift in and what's been really popular is the upskilling managers in terms of having those conversations to create that trust.
right. Okay, okay. So what would you say are the top three reasons to invest in well-being today then?
For me, well-being is no longer a luxury, which I think it used to be seen. It's definitely a strategic priority. And I'd simplify it into three main areas. You've got performance, retention, and risk. And when people are well, mentally, physically, emotionally, they think more clearly, make better decisions, and they collaborate better. I think I mentioned that just earlier. And you can see a definite impact on the business results there. But also with retention, well-being is now a key part of that employee value proposition, and people are actively choosing employers based on how they feel rather than the salary or job title, which used to be a key driver. And thirdly, I think with that risk, poor well-being shows up in absence, in burnout, in presenteeism, and ultimately attrition, which are all really, really expensive. So I believe truly that investing in well-being is about preventing these much bigger problems from happening further down the line.
Yeah, really, really makes sense, doesn't it? It's that thing, isn't it? Is that if you go to work and you feel good about work, and you're in the right environment, and you talk about psychological safety, it's labeled, you feel safe as well in the workplace, but also if they're looking after your well-being, and that can only be a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we know is that organizations that actively support it, you get the improved engagement and productivity, reduced stress and burnout, enhanced teamwork, which is huge, and
Yeah,
morale. You want to walk into an office where you feel supported and happy, stronger employer brands. There's so many positives of supporting it, but it's about being proactive rather than leaving it until it's too late and then supporting it.
right, okay. So where do organizations get it wrong then?
So I believe the biggest mistake is when you treat things as isolated initiatives rather than looking at how it's embedded within the organization and the priorities. You see lots of well-intended sessions that people run or access to an app, but it's often not connected to the day-to-day, which is really, really crucial and aligned with leadership behavior. And the other is that one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah,
It doesn't. It needs to be personal. For what's going on for one person, is going to be very different to another. And so we've designed, for instance, everything from divorce coaching to having a stammer or a stutter to a therapeutic parenting. So it's really, really quite niche. And
yeah,
what's going to work for one is definitely going to be different. And also bringing in that generational difference.
yeah.
The carer is not going to be suitable for someone of a different generation. So this whole offering, I think it's just really important to think about what your workforce is made up of and how you can tailor solutions for particular ages and stages rather than saying this is our wellbeing offering.
Yeah, that's really good because I think of it in the past and I think, you'd always have your benefits and you'd take your benefits and part of those benefits might be something around well-being, gym membership, wherever it might be. But actually it was kind of the same for all. Yeah. So what you're doing there makes absolutely complete sense. So I
And
know,
I remember the fruit basket,
oh
but
yeah, yeah.
when you sign in at reception, there was the apples and the oranges and the bananas. Things
Yeah.
have progressed since then.
Because then, yeah, definitely. And I know you talked about this. So launching this platform, why now is this, do you think, the thing to do and the way to go?
Well, I think why now is because we really see this gap in the market around this one side about doing tailored personal solutions. I think there's a real need for it. People are crying out for it. And we know that this is a way of giving employees access to a number of different sessions that they can pick and choose and select depending on what they want, rather than saying this is the wellbeing program. So that's self-selection. But we developed it because we kept on seeing that same challenges of organizations investing in wellbeing, but that uptake just there was no uptake and it was just inconsistent. So that missing bit was the personalization. So that's really why we launched it. But it's not a single solution. It's more of a spectrum of choices, and
Yeah.
people can just self-select.
Yeah, I've seen you send me a brochure through as prior to I did my little bit of research before the session today, and it's really comprehensive, isn't it? There's a lot. I was really surprised. There's a lot in it.
There's a lot of choice, and that's why we've tried to group it into a number of different themes, so it
Yeah.
makes it easier for the employee to choose as to whether it's mental health or physical health or emotional health. They can help. It's easier to select. Yeah.
Okay. So if you were picking one of the options for you at the moment, what would it be?
Dealing with kids. I've got two primary school children,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it is, as one's about to go into secondary school from September, but it
Okay.
is full on managing those moods.
Yeah.
I guess we'll be dealing with teenagers, but no, I think that, and it's pretty interesting because I think with flexible working, when I first entered the world of work, that was a
Yeah.
perk, and now
Yeah.
it's very much seen as a norm. You have to
Yeah.
do that because 85% of people need that flexibility, whether you've got kids or no kids, whatever. But it's just really important. So I find that work-life balance really important as well.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. It's amazing, isn't it? Because I think about the world of work before the pandemic and after the pandemic and how things have since changed and what's more acceptable now compared to what was acceptable in the past, if you know what I mean. So what is the one thing leaders could start doing tomorrow to improve work well-being in the organization?
We have to say it's about having better conversations. And I know it sounds simple, but
Yeah,
making sure that employees come to work with their manager who has created that safe space, psychological safety, so they can actually have those conversations. If leaders aren't equipped to be able to talk about stress or emotions, it's going to be very hard for the employee to have that conversation, initiate that support. So I'd say that, but also rather than starting with programs, start with the capability. So who needs what training and how can we roll that out?
okay, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. So, look at well-being, then I kind of look at it. We were talking about it being a set of benefits into something embedded into the culture of the organization. So how do you move from that, it being that set of benefits that's it's been like that in the past to embedding it now in the I know probably you've already started to answer it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, it comes back to me saying well-being is the business strategy. It's not an HR initiative,
Right.
and I think it's educating CEOs, the C-suite around the importance of it, and
Yeah.
then it can cascade out. But I think if you can link it to attrition, link it with the ROI and the
Yeah.
stats to show the business case for well-being and introducing it early on rather than so it's I think I do see well-being moving from reactive to preventative to predictive. So and with AI, we talked about that earlier, AI and stats, it's much easier to anticipate risk, burnout and attrition. But I think building it in earlier and having it as core as part of the strategy
Yeah.
will really help.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because my mind then was obviously doing the ideas and all of that, and I was thinking straight away. I was thinking in the future, you'll probably walk in if you're working in an office. At the end of the day, you might not be, depending on where you're working. At the end of the day, the AI will probably be reading your vitals throughout the day. So it'll probably
Booking
be
a holiday.
yeah, yeah. It'll probably be telling you, now's the time to maximize performance. Now's the time to be at a meeting, wherever it might be. But if you think about the way the future's going, so actually starting to talk about this stuff now, I think it's really key for organizations, isn't it, to get on top of this now? Really, really do. So,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
here's a killer question for you then. So, how would you measure the impact of well-being in organizations rather than it just being about take up?
I think there's so many clear stats that have been published.
Yeah.
around well-being, such as, 40%, 47% of UK employers report that productivity increases when staff and health well-being is supported. A source reports that UK employees with access to well-being support are 33% more likely to recommend their employer and 45% more likely to stay. So based on a number of stats out there,
Yeah.
you can absolutely see the value of it. But I still think it comes back to, what does the employee need,
Yeah.
rather than, I'm just thinking back, 10 years ago, people were running resilience, that keyword, resilience,
Yeah. Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
well-being. We were often badging those three together
Yeah.
as support. But in all honesty, was that the right thing, or was it just seen as we want to say we're offering it, so let's offer it? But if
Yeah.
you can really tailor it, I think you'll be able to see the ROI by people staying in the organization, by people going the extra mile,
Yeah.
by and having um, engaged teams as well.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. And I know you talked about leaders having the conversations, but going back to leadership, what role do leaders play in the success or failure of this?
Leaders need to be bought in. Leaders need to have that trust with the team
Yeah.
and the psychological safety within the team. Because if they can have the conversations, I think a lot of leaders shy away from conversations, either because it's in that too difficult to do box, or they just don't know how, they don't have the skills.
Yeah.
But that's why it comes back to that equipping leaders with being able to establish rapport with their team around the well-being conversations. Then
Yeah.
in this open environment, everyone will feel safe to have these conversations. But the thing about going back to the marketplace, is actually, if, just take divorce because it was on my mind, if you are going through a divorce at home and you don't want your line manager to know, because not everyone does,
Yeah.
it's all anonymous on this platform as well. So a lot of organizations like the fact that they are supporting employees, but they don't actually need to know in
Yeah.
what.
On the basis of, the big idea, then how would you summarize, I mean, not everything you said, but how would you summarize then on the basis of what we talked about, why this is so important?
For me, it's around HR, the HR leaders seeing well-being as part of the business strategy, not driven
Yeah.
by them. So it really needs to come from the top.
Yeah.
And for organizations to think ahead, think about what's needed, what do our broad, diverse workforce need, and how can we have an offering that basically suits everyone, and letting the employees pick. If you want that engaged, happy workforce who are highly productive, that's
Yeah.
the way forward. So you can bring your best self to work, perform well, and yeah, and increase shareholder value ultimately.
Great stuff. Well, that's really, really clear. I think it'll add real value to organizations. So I'm gonna close there. So thank you very much for your time for coming on the podcast, Liz, and sharing the idea with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Paul, for having me.